Hello, dear viewers, and welcome back to the channel where we meticulously examine the shifting sands of the British monarchy, uncovering the stories that often remain just beneath the surface of the official narrative. Today, we delve into a profound and rather poignant sighting that has captured the attention of royal watchers globally. The appearance of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, once known as the high-profile Duke of York, back on horseback within the familiar, storied grounds of Windsor Castle. It is a moment heavy with symbolism, a fleeting glimpse into the drastically altered life of a man who was once destined for the very heart of the royal firm. Before we dissect the details of this quiet, solitary ride and what it truly signifies for the former prince, do remember to show your support. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the history and current affairs of the crown. The solitary ride, a return to the saddle. For months, the public has been acutely aware of the deliberate absence of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor from nearly all aspects of public life. His withdrawal has been comprehensive, dramatic, and, by all accounts, necessary, following the sustained repercussions of years of scandal. That is why the recent sighting, confirmed by those near the sprawling estate, holds such significance. For the first time since the 3rd of October, he was observed exercising his mount. The scene was quintessential Windsor, yet the context surrounding the rider was anything but traditional. For those keeping a careful calendar of his sparse appearances, this equestrian outing breaks a notable silence. His last official, public engagement, a truly solemn occasion, was the funeral service for the Duchess of Kent, held at the majestic Westminster Cathedral on the 16th of September. The gap between that formal, grieving event and this recent quiet ride across the royal parklands serves as a stark, almost month-long reminder of the depth of his retreat from the royal spotlight. The fact that he chose to return to the saddle, a pastime deeply ingrained in the traditions of the British aristocracy and the royal family, is perhaps a small nod to normalcy, a brief moment of respite amid overwhelming change. He was spotted enjoying a brisk, purposeful ride in the expansive grounds of Windsor Castle, specifically along the iconic route known as the Long Walk, near the castle gates. He looked every bit the experienced, if now retired, Duke, dressed practically for the elements. His attire was notably low-key, featuring riding trousers and a protective, disciplined black helmet, paired with utilitarian khaki gear. He was not entirely alone, however. Accompanying him was a female groom, a necessary and traditional attendant for such an outing, but a small entourage compared to the pomp and ceremony that once defined his movements. The now 65-year-old, stripped of his most prestigious military and civilian titles, maintained a discreet profile as he trotted along the historic pathway, a profound contrast to the high-profile life he once commanded. 2. The weight of renunciation, titles and territory. This appearance marks the first time Andrew has been seen in such a setting since the truly seismic official changes that occurred just last month, wherein he relinquished all his remaining royal titles, styles, and honors. The renunciation of these distinctions is not merely symbolic. It represents a comprehensive severing of his formal ties to the working monarchy and the privileges that came with that status. To understand the weight of this moment, we must appreciate the sheer scale of the displacement underway. This quiet ride comes in the wake of a dramatic royal reshuffle, orchestrated at the highest levels of the monarchy. The most tangible evidence of this enforced transition is the surrender of his residence, the sprawling 30-room Royal Lodge. For decades, Royal Lodge had been Andrew's personal kingdom, his primary residence, secured under what was once described as a rock-solid cast-iron lease, a contractual arrangement that still had well over 50 years left to run. This was not a short-term tenancy. It was a deep, generational commitment to the property, granting him rights and control that seemed insurmountable. The necessity of relinquishing this cherished home, however, was not a simple matter of packing up belongings and handing over a set of keys. It required meticulous, detailed, and undoubtedly difficult negotiations with the king's representatives, the senior advisors and legal counsel acting on behalf of the reigning monarch. It speaks volumes about the determination of the current structure of the monarchy to enforce this transition that such a heavily fortified legal arrangement had to be dismantled. Ultimately, following this prolonged period of strategic discussion, Andrew finally served formal notice to surrender the lease, signaling the inevitable end of his tenure at the lodge. The destination for his future is equally significant. He is preparing for a significantly quieter, more secluded existence on the King's Sandringham estate, situated in the county of Norfolk. This move, slated for implementation next year, marks a definitive geographical and social retreat from the central hub of royal power and influence centered around Windsor and London. 3. The Catalogue of Consequences, the Fall from Grace. The reason for this profound and public fall from grace is tragically well documented and remains the defining narrative of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's later life. The cascade of consequences follows a devastating series of scandals inextricably linked to the disgraced American financier Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew's association with Epstein, a convicted sex offender who died in 2019, triggered a public relations crisis of extraordinary magnitude for the British monarchy. Central to this crisis were the severe accusations leveled against Andrew by Virginia Giuffre, who alleged sexual abuse. It is crucial to note, as Andrew has maintained throughout this ordeal, that he vehemently denies these claims. Despite his denials, the public perception and the institutional reaction within the palace walls were swift and unyielding. Andrew has been largely out of the public eye and removed from official royal duties since 2019. This withdrawal was directly triggered by the catastrophic fallout from his televised interview with BBC Newsnight, an attempt to clear his name that, by almost universal consensus, backfired spectacularly, deepening the public's skepticism and outrage. The interview, intended as a definitive closure, instead opened a floodgate of scrutiny that the royal machine has struggled to contain ever since. And the scrutiny, it seems, is far from over. Even as Andrew attempts to transition into a life of quiet anonymity, fresh details continue to emerge that fuel public fascination and, inevitably, renewed gossip. Recent reports indicate that fresh emails have surfaced, suggesting that the former prince maintained contact with the disgraced financier well past the year 2010. If true, this extended timeline of association further complicates his narrative of limited or passing acquaintance, reinforcing the image of a relationship that was sustained long after Epstein's initial legal troubles became widely known. The juxtaposition is stark. Here is a man, the son of a queen and brother to a king, who once enjoyed the highest echelons of global society and military honor, now reduced to a figure of intense controversy, his every movement analyzed for signs of weakness or resilience. Even this simple, restorative act of riding on horseback, a moment that should be entirely private, is observed through the lens of scandal. The former Duke's royal ride seems profoundly distant from the fairy tale life and unassailable position he once enjoyed within the ramparts of Windsor. 4. The strategic surrender. Analyzing the Royal Lodge law, Wasalanda's return to the matter of Royal Lodge because its surrender is perhaps the most concrete demonstration of the king's ultimate authority and the finality of Andrew's banishment from the inner circle. The Royal Lodge is more than just a large house. It is a historical monument intertwined with the personal history of the late Queen Mother, and it represented a vital anchor for Andrew and his family. The fact that the lease was described as cast iron implies a degree of legal protection, usually reserved for the most senior members of the family, suggesting that any attempt to dissolve it would face significant legal hurdles. The process of relinquishing this property was therefore a test of wills and strategic maneuvering. When the king's representatives became involved, it signified that this was no longer a personal dispute but a matter of institutional necessity, driven by the imperative to streamline the monarchy and distance the crown from the ongoing controversy. The surrender of the lease required Andrew to serve formal notice. This legal step underscores the complexity. Even in yielding, he had to follow established protocols, confirming that the agreement was not simply broken, but formally dissolved according to its own terms, albeit under intense pressure. This transition, from a 30-room sanctuary at the epicenter of royal power, to a more modest, perhaps distant dwelling on the Sandringham estate, is a physical manifestation of his loss of status. Sandringham, while beautiful and historically significant, often serves as a retreat for less senior or retired members of the family. It signals a permanent shift toward a life of rural seclusion, far removed from the daily machinations of the monarchy in London and Windsor. The sheer scale of the move, involving a 30-room residence, suggests a massive logistical undertaking, further emphasizing the finality of his departure. It cements the understanding that his time as a high-ranking, publicly visible royal figure is conclusively over, replaced by a mandate for absolute privacy and discretion. V. The enduring shadow, public perception and future prospects. The enduring public fascination with Andrew stems not just from the scandal itself, but from the dramatic nature of his fall. He was, after all, the second son of the sovereign, a Falklands War veteran, and a figure who held immense prestige. The contrast between that former glory and his current predicament, a figure largely confined to the grounds of his remaining properties, his public movements, tracked with the same intensity as a rare bird, is compelling, if tragic. The quietness of his life since 2019, punctuated only by rare, unavoidable family events like funerals, highlights the success of the palace's strategy to minimize his public exposure. The horse ride, therefore, is an anomaly, a brief crack in the carefully constructed wall of silence. It is interesting to reflect on the psychological implications of this new existence. For a man who was once the Duke of York, accustomed to commanding attention and holding significant influence, the transition to being a low-key figure, accompanied only by a groom, must represent an enormous personal adjustment. His move to Sandringham next year will represent the ultimate geographical and professional retirement. It removes him from the immediate vicinity of his brother, King Charles III, and the Prince and Princess of Wales, allowing the younger, working royals to establish their own narrative free from the constant shadow of the Epstein scandal. The persistent drip feed of information, such as the suggestion that contact with Epstein continued past 2010, ensures that the narrative of his association remains potent in the public consciousness. While the immediate legal threats may have been settled through financial arrangements, the reputational damage is clearly permanent, necessitating the ultimate sacrifices of title and home. The sight of Andrew on the long walk, dressed simply, riding briskly, underscores the reality that even for royalty, there are consequences that necessitate the surrender of long-held privileges and comfort. His personal kingdom, the Royal Lodge, has been reclaimed, and his official status has been revoked. He is now simply Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, navigating a profoundly different and infinitely quieter future. Conclusion and final thoughts. In summary, the recent sighting of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor on horseback at Windsor Castle is far more than a simple photograph. It is a profound visual marker of his continuing, enforced withdrawal from royal life. We have witnessed his return to the saddle for the first time since the 3rd of October, following his last public appearance at the Duchess of Kent's funeral on September 16th. This quiet outing occurs precisely when he is preparing to move from his 30-room fortress, Royal Lodge, to the more distant Sandringham estate, having formally surrendered the cast-iron lease after careful negotiations with the king's representatives. This entire sequence of events, the loss of titles, the forced relocation, and the continued shadow of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal and the Virginia Giuffre allegations, paints a clear picture of the seismic shift in his life since the disastrous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview and the subsequent reports of contact continuing past 2010. It is a striking demonstration of the monarchy's enduring power to reorganize itself, even when dealing with its own most controversial members. The former Duke's life, once defined by privilege and prominence, is now characterized by privacy and retreat. What are your thoughts on this latest chapter in Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's story? Does this quiet, equestrian life signal a genuine attempt at atonement and withdrawal? Or is it simply the mandated consequence of an institutional crisis? Please share your opinions in the comments section below. We read all your contributions and appreciate the insight you bring to these complex royal matters. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and join us for our next detailed update on the affair of the British royal family. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.